Okay, so are you ready for a deep dive into some seriously spooky places?
Always up for a good haunting.
Well, buckle up because today we're headed to the heart of haunted America, checking out two places known for their chilling histories and even more chilling reports of paranormal activity.
Ooh, okay, lay it on me. Where are we headed?
First up, we have Hillview Manor in Pennsylvania,
Hillview Manor. Oh, I've heard of that one.
and then we're going to swing over to the infamous Conjuring House in Rhode Island.
Oh, a classic. It's like haunted house royalty. You know, the thing that always gets me about these kinds of places is how the documented history, like actual events,
Right.
it always seems to almost bleed into the ghost stories. It's like one feeds the other. Makes you wonder what really went on and if it's still going on.
It's that chicken or the egg situation. Like, does a troubled past make a place more likely to be haunted? Who knows? But it's definitely fun to think about. So should we start with Hillview Manor?
Let's do it.
It might sound kind of charming, Hillview, but trust me, this place has a past. It was originally called the Lawrence County Home for the Aged when it opened back in 1926.
1926, huh?
Ah,
Yeah, places like that often have a lot of, shall we say, baggage.
that's putting it lightly. And sadly, Hillview is no exception. Like a lot of institutions back then, it wasn't just for the elderly. It also housed, the destitute and folks struggling with mental illness.
Oh, wow. So you've got a mix of folks who are already vulnerable, and then you add in the whole institutional setting.
Yeah, and from the beginning, it was plagued with overcrowding and understaffing.
Oh, so like a recipe for neglect, and honestly, probably a whole lot of suffering. It's heartbreaking, really, just thinking about it.
Absolutely. And you can practically feel the weight of all that history just reading about it. It's heavy stuff. They did eventually try to revamp the place. It became Hillview Manor, a nursing home, after some renovations in the 1960s. But even with a fresh coat of paint, you can't erase the past, can you?
No, you can't outrun history, as they say.
And eventually it seems like they just couldn't outrun the financial struggles either. Hillview closed down for good in 2004.
Leaving behind a lot of stories, I'm sure.
Oh, tons. And some seriously eerie ones. We're talking about a place where it's estimated 10,000 people died over its 78 years.
10,000. Wow, that's practically a whole city's worth of lives and losses. No wonder people say it's one of the most haunted places in America.
Right. It's not even just the number, though, that's crazy enough. It's the types of deaths, too. Suicides, people jumping from the roof.
Oh, gosh, that's awful.
Yeah, and then all the people laid to rest in unmarked graves right there on the property in their cemetery.
Yeah, that's a lot of energy, that kind of sadness and loss. It's bound to leave some kind of mark,
Oh, absolutely. You almost get a sense of it just hearing about it. And if that's not enough, there are also all these EVPs.
EVPs. Oh, you mean electronic voice phenomenon?
Exactly. Investigators have captured them all over the place. And the one they keep picking up over and over is this voice saying, "I'm Jim.
I'm Jin.
I'm Jim, plain as day."
Yeah.
But no one knows who Jim is. Was he a patient? Staff? It's those little details that really get to you.
Totally. Like a little breadcrumb trail leading into the unknown. There's a whole story, a whole life behind that simple phrase, "I'm Jim." It's both intriguing and a little bit sad, right?
It really is. And it's not even just voices. One of the most active spots in Hillview is the old boiler room.
The boiler room. Okay, yeah, those are creepy enough on their own. What happened there?
So apparently a man died there, alcohol poisoning and hypothermia, after a night of drinking outside.
Oh, wow. That's a rough way to go.
It is. And what's even weirder, maybe even connected, female visitors and workers have reported being grabbed in that same room.
Whoa, really? See, that's what I mean about that bleed through between history and hauntings. Is it residual energy from that tragic event? Or is it something more conscious? Like something more intentional? I don't know, it's creepy to think about.
Definitely sends shivers down my spine. And that's not even the creepiest part. Wait till you hear about Jeffrey.
Okay, Jeffrey, you say. Who's Jeffrey?
So he's believed to be the ghost of a young boy, one of the very first patients at the home back in 1926.
Wait a minute, a young boy back then. But I thought this place was mainly for the elderly.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so unsettling. People have reported seeing him, like full-on apparition, playing in the halls.
So that begs the question, was there ever a children's ward at Hillview?
Right. But so far, no one can find any record of one.
So is Jeffrey residual haunting then? Like a glimpse into a time when the building served a different purpose? Or is there something else going on entirely?
Yeah.
It's those unanswered questions that really get me hooked.
Me too. And speaking of hooked and unsettling histories, we have to talk about the home that inspired The Conjuring. This place takes creepy to a whole other level.
Oh, I am so ready for this one. Fill me in on the details.
So we're talking about this seemingly ordinary farmhouse in Rhode Island, Ryler. But here's the thing, it dates back to 1736.
1736. Are you serious? That's like way before the United States even existed.
Yeah.
Wow, can you imagine the stories those walls could tell if they could talk? That's incredible.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind to think about how much time has passed and all the things that must have happened in that house.
Seriously. And it's seen a lot, let me tell you. We're talking multiple families' lives lived and lost within those walls. But it was the Perron family who really put this place on the map and in the horror movie history books.
The Barone family, right, from The
Yeah.
Conjuring. So was the movie, like, actually filmed there?
Not exactly. They moved into the house in the 1970s with their 5 daughters and had no idea what they were in for. Their experiences, let me tell you, were so intense, so disturbing, that they became the inspiration for the 2013 film.
Okay, so not filmed there, but their real-life experiences were the basis for the whole thing. Chills, literal chills. And wasn't that movie, like, a huge hit?
Huge! It even spawned a whole franchise. So thanks to the Perron family's terrifying ordeal, this seemingly ordinary farmhouse in Rhode Island became a horror icon.
And you said we're picking up with their story next time, because I don't know about you, but I am hooked.
You better believe we are. But before we dive into their experiences, it's important to remember this house already had a reputation long before they moved in. I mean, 1736. Think about it. Centuries of history, with whispers of darkness echoing through the years.
Okay, now you've got me really spooked. You're right, let's dig into those whispers. What kinds of things were people saying about the house before the Perrons arrived? I need to know more.
Well, let's just say the Perrons weren't the first to experience something unsettling in that house. Some of the stories, and these are old ones, go all the way back to the 1700s, soon after it was built, and they're connected to something pretty dark.
Oh, okay, this is getting good. What kind of darkness are we talking about here?
Some people believe that the spirits haunting the house are connected to a much darker period. The displacement of Native Americans when the house was first constructed.
Oh, wow. You're talking about, like, the land itself being a source of unrest. That adds a whole other layer of complexity to things, doesn't it? To think that the very ground the house was built on might hold the energy of those who were forced to leave.
Exactly. And it makes you think. I mean, history often glosses over the experiences of Indigenous people, especially when it comes to things like land rights and forced removals. It's a stark reminder that the past isn't always pretty, and sometimes those injustices can leave a lasting impact.
That's a really good point. It's like you're saying sometimes the scariest thing isn't the ghost story itself, but the very real history that led up to it.
Precisely. And the Conjuring house has layers upon layers of that history. We're not just talking about a few ghost stories. We're talking about centuries of human experience, some of it joyful, some of it tragic, all of it leaving its mark on that place.
It's like you're painting a picture with words, and it's both beautiful and haunting at the same time. Okay, I need to hear more about these layers. What else happened in that house? Spill the tea. Give me all the spooky details.
Well, on top of those early accounts, you have this long, unsettling timeline of other events. Suicides, murders, and unexplained deaths.
Oh, so it's not just the land itself, but also all the events that happen on it, too.
Exactly. It's like each tragic event added another layer to the already heavy atmosphere.
You keep using that word layers, and I can't help but picture, like, a cake, but instead of frosting, it's tragedy and sorrow.
Huh. I guess you could say that. But you're right, it's a fitting metaphor. You have those foundational layers, the displacement, the construction of the home, and then over time you add these layers of human suffering, each one leaving its own indelible mark.
Wow. Okay, so you've got the land, you've got this history of tragedy, and then into that mix you add the Perron family in the 1970s. No wonder things got so, well, intense. It's like they walked right into, well, you know.
Right into a perfect storm of paranormal activity. You got it. And trust me, their experiences were the real deal. We're talking full-on apparitions, objects moving on their own, beds shaking violently in the night, even instances of physical harm.
Okay, now this is what I'm talking about. See, this is why I love these deep dives. You never know what you're going to get.
Never a dull moment. One of the daughters, Andrea, later wrote a whole book about her experiences. She described being touched, pushed, even having her hair pulled by unseen forces.
What? No way. See,
Yeah.
that's what it gets, the physical stuff. I mean, cold spots and weird noises are one thing, but being touched or grabbed,
That's a whole other level of scary. And it really makes you wonder what was going on in that house. Was it some kind of residual energy, or were those spirits actually aware of the living and interacting with them in a very direct and often malevolent way?
yeah, that's a bit too close for comfort.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this very active, very old house with a very heavy history. Anything else we need to know about this place before we get to the Perrin family's experiences?
Just one more thing. We have to talk about Bathsheba.
Bathsheba. Who's Bathsheba? Wait, is that a name?
It is, and it's a name that sends shivers down the spines of anyone who knows the Conjuring house.
Oh, I am intrigued. Tell me more. What's the story with this Bathsheba?
Well, legend has it that Bathsheba Sherman was, get this, a Satanist who lived in the house back in the 1800s.
A Satanist in the 1800s? Okay, yeah, that tracks with the whole creepy vibe.
And the stories get even darker. They say she sacrificed her own child and cursed the land, vowing that anyone else who tried to make a home there would suffer.
Oh my gosh, that's brutal. I mean, sacrificing your own child, that's a whole other level of evil.
Yeah.
But you said it's a legend, right? So how much of that is fact and how much is folklore?
It's hard to say for sure, but here's the thing. Whether it's true or not, the story of Bathsheba has become so ingrained in the history of the Conjuring house that it's almost impossible to separate fact from fiction at this point. And honestly, does it even matter?
You've got a point.
The legend itself has become as much a part of the house's story as anything that's actually documented. And that's what I find so interesting about these haunted locations. The stories, the legends, become as real and tangible as the bricks and mortar. It's like they take on a life of their own, inseparable from the physical place.
It's like that old saying, if these walls could talk. Well, in a way, they do talk, but they speak through the stories, the legends, and the experiences of those who dare to enter. And in this case, those stories are pretty darn chilling. So are you telling me Bathsheba's spirit is still there? Still haunting the house?
Yeah.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And one we might just find an answer to when we delve into the Perron family's experiences. Because, let me tell you, if those walls could talk, they would scream. So the Perron family, they moved into this supposedly haunted farmhouse back in the 1970s, right? With their five daughters.
5 daughters. Oh man, talk about brave. Or maybe a little crazy. I mean, knowing what we know about this house. But then again, they didn't know, did they? Not at first.
Not a clue. Can you imagine moving your family into a house with this dark history, and you don't even realize it?
Like something out of a movie, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're just blissfully unaware, and we're sitting here on the edge of our seats just waiting for it all to hit the fan.
And hit the fan it did. We've got their accounts, thankfully, so we kind of know what went down. We're talking full-on apparitions, objects moving, beds shaking like crazy in the middle of the night. There were even times when they experienced actual physical harm.
See, that's the stuff that would make me run for the hills.
Yeah.
Not just see a ghost, but be touched, or worse. No, thank you. Those poor people. What did they see?
Well, one of the daughters, Andrea, she later wrote a book about what happened. She talks about being touched, pushed, even having her hair pulled by something she couldn't see.
Oh, God, that's just awful. And to think, it wasn't just her, right? All those girls and their parents. It makes you wonder how they even functioned, how they got through it.
And it gets worse. Andrea, she wasn't the only one targeted. Carolyn, the mom, she bore the brunt of a lot of the activity, too. I mean, really awful stuff. Apparently, at one point, she was even possessed.
Possessed. Hold on. Are we talking like full-on demonic possession here? Like in the movie?
That's what they say. And remember, Ed and Lorraine Warren, the paranormal investigators, they were called in to help the family. And, well, they believed it was a case of demonic possession, too.
Oh, wow. The Warrens were involved. Okay, now that's saying something. They investigated a ton of hauntings, right? But they didn't get involved in every case, did they?
No, they were very selective. And the fact that they were called in to help with this case just goes to show how serious, how intense the activity was. And, when you look at the history of the house, it's almost like the Perrons' experiences were like the culmination of all the negative energy that had been building up for centuries.
Right. Like all those layers of tragedy and suffering that we talked about, they finally reached a boiling point with the Perron family.
So,
It's heartbreaking, really,
Yeah.
to think about what they went through. But it's also a powerful reminder that these places, they hold on to energy, to memories, to emotions. And sometimes those things can manifest in really frightening ways.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got the Perron family's terrifying experiences, and we've got this long, disturbing history of the house itself. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to talk about: Bathsheba Sherman.
Oh, right. Bathsheba. You mentioned her earlier, the alleged Satanist who sacrificed her own child. It's all connected, isn't it? I knew it.
It's all connected. See, Bathsheba's story, whether it's entirely true or not, it's been passed down for generations. And it's become so ingrained in the lore of the Conjuring house that it's impossible to ignore.
You think she was behind it all? Bathsheba, I mean. All the horrible things that happened to the parents.
I don't know if we can say for sure, but the possibility is definitely there. I mean, think about it. A woman accused of being a Satanist, of sacrificing her own child in that house. Imagine the rage, the despair, the malevolence that might be attached to that kind of event.
Okay. Yeah, now that you say it like that, it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
You're saying all that negative energy, it could have seeped into the very walls of the house.
Yeah.
And then centuries later, it's still affecting people.
That's what a lot of people believe, yeah. And when you consider everything else we know about the house, the Native American burial ground, all the other tragedies that happened there, it's not so far-fetched.
You're right. It's like this perfect storm of negative energy, and the Perrons, they just wandered right into it. It makes you wonder how much of what we experience, the good and the bad, is influenced by the places we inhabit.
Exactly. And how much of it is our own doing versus something, well, something beyond our control.
Beyond our control, you say. Now, that's a thought that'll keep you up at night.
It's kind of wild when you think about it, right? We always hear about these big spooky mansions or abandoned asylums being haunted, but it's like those stories can pop up anywhere, can't they?
Totally. I mean, think about it. Every house has a past, right? Every town has those local legends, those whispers in the dark. We just don't always know about them, or maybe we just haven't looked for them.
It's true. Every place has stories, just waiting to be uncovered. Which gets me thinking, We've talked about Hellview Manor, all that heavy energy, those tragic stories, and then the Conjuring house, layers upon layers of history and folklore. But besides just being supposedly haunted, what else connects those two places? What makes their stories stick with us?
That's a good question. They both tap into that fear of the unknown, but also that fascination with the past. But you're right, there's another connection here, and I think it goes back to something we talked about earlier, vulnerable populations.
You mean how Hillview was home to the elderly, the poor, those struggling with mental illness, and then the Conjuring house? At least according to those really old stories, it was built on land taken from indigenous people.
Exactly. Both locations, even though they're different, housed people who were, what's the word? Marginalized,
Yeah.
or forgotten, or even silenced by society. And their stories, their pain, their very existence might be like woven into the fabric of those places. You know what I mean?
It's like their energy, their experiences, they kind of lingered long after they were gone.
Right. It's a fascinating idea, right? It makes you think maybe those really heightened emotional states, the suffering, the fear, they left some kind of, I don't know, imprint on these places, like an echo of the past that we can still pick up on today.
It gives me chills just thinking about it, but like good chills. It's like we need to remember those stories, even the tough ones, Give a voice to those who might have been silenced.
Exactly. It's not just about being spooked out, right? It's about like holding up a mirror to history, even the dark parts. We've got to acknowledge that it's all connected.
That's so well said. And, it gets me thinking about all the stories hidden away, like right in my own backyard. Maybe it's time to do some digging, explore some local legends.
I'm all about that. Who knows? You might just uncover the next great haunted tale.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, gotta leave our listeners with something to chew on, Rafe.
Hit us with it. I love a good challenge.
Okay, so here it is. Think about your own neighborhood. What's that one place, that one building that's always given you the creeps? Or even just, I don't know, sparked your curiosity. Maybe it's that old house at the end of the street with the weird stories, or that abandoned factory downtown. I challenge you, go out there and do some digging. Talk to some old timers, visit your local library. You never know what you might find lurking beneath the surface.
Right. Every haunted place, every spooky story, it started with something. Some little whisper, some fleeting moment in time. It's up to us to, listen, investigate, maybe piece together those fragments of the past.
Love it. Big thanks to you for joining me on this journey into haunted America.
Anytime.
And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep those questions coming. And remember, sometimes the most fascinating stories are the ones just waiting to be discovered, right in our own backyards.